Hey there. Welcome to Season 2 of The Artist in Me is Dead podcast. I'm your host, Rhonda Willers. This third episode features a conversation with visual artist and arts worker Sara Nishikawa. Sara is based in Detroit, Michigan. Her sculptural practice coexists with a profession in nonprofit administration. Her approach to studio practice is one of desired balance, but also recognizing the peaks and valleys of creative life. As part of her creative practice, she hosts one-day baking residencies known as Mostly Butter. Throughout our conversation, Sara comes back to the importance of your community of support as a lifeline to keeping creativity alive. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank all of you for listening and sharing, and to celebrate that the podcast has over 4,000 downloads from across the world. Thank you so much for your support. Please enjoy this episode with Sara Nishikawa. Well, Sara, thank you for joining me for this conversation today. And I want to start with, if you could share with people listening where your creativity story starts. When did you kind of notice that you were, visually creative or just even creative in thinking? Like, where did that begin for you?
I don't have a moment or a time, but I grew up with around people who were really creative, and I think of it a little bit more of that I sort of prioritize that quality in people. So my dad is like a problem solver like no other, but also did really strange things, like when we found whole dead bugs, would cast them in resin, which is like so hip, and he was like so ahead of his time. And if
Yeah.
only he knew that, we could have, he would have his whole own journey.
Yeah.
And my aunt was one of those people who my favorite anecdote of hers is that we went to California Pizza Kitchen when it first opened in Hawaii, and we had spinach artichoke dip, and that was like a brand new food in my world, like brand new. Like I can literally remember the table we sat at, and it, like brand new food in my world. And the next week when I went back over, she had like figured out how to make it.
Oh my God.
I know she was so incredible with like she was just such a good cook. She was really creative, and I feel like those were the two people I sort of gravitated towards.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really know if I ever like thought of myself as like creative in any way. It was just
Mm-hmm.
that I always wanted to do the things that they were doing, and really thought that there was something different and special and cool about that versus like, maybe sports, or I mean,
Yeah.
that was the thing I was drawn towards a little bit
Yeah.
more. And whenever I look back, yeah, there's not really like cool projects, but anytime that there is an opportunity to be around one of those people, that's
Mm-hmm.
like kind of where I wanted to be.
I kind of
So it
love,
was
yeah, I'm just gonna interrupt for a second, but I kind of love that you're describing it that way and thinking about, like, my question is, like, has that continued for you today? Like, do you still find yourself gravitated towards certain people in that sort of same way that you were them?
I mean, definitely. I I like to be around a person who's like, I mean, I really enjoy creative problem solving, but somebody who's just like super interested in what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's like the more niche it is, the more like, oh, if you can get me interested, like fully,
Mm-hmm.
fully there about it, and especially if it's a creative thing. And so, I can't tell if all of my friends are artists because that's the world I live in,
Right.
or if I've sort of moved towards everybody I want to be around as artists. Like, I really don't know if I've ever made a decision, but everyone, I just had friends that visited, and we all went to Northridge together, but we are all are working in creative fields. We are just naturally drawn towards like
Mm.
figuring out building a table, being like, oh, I can build that shelf, or I can do that sort of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
um and and I think, yeah, I think there is just a like, if somebody is so interested in what they're doing,
Yeah.
it it's really exciting to be around.
Yes,
And
it
I
is.
think, and I think maybe I'm conflating interest and creativity, but like those are the same sort of things in my brain, because
Yeah.
you're wanting to find like new spaces, and you're wanting to like dig a little deeper. And if that's not, creativity, it's not necessarily making, but it's somebody who's just like hyper focused on something so strange,
Mm-hmm.
or normal, just like,
Just that they're
just
focused deeply and passionate. So what,
yeah.
like, okay, so that I'm kind of curious then, like so you're, in a way, you're sort of describing this as possibly creativity, but what do you tell yourself is creative, or what do you think of as creativity? Like if I just said, hey, Sarah, what's creativity?
Yeah. Oof. Um, I think I was so uh in a box about it for a
Mm,
long time, because I held that as so important to me, to be like, I am creative because I'm
mm.
a maker, and I can I look at the world differently. And there was
Oh,
like
yeah.
an air about it. And I know that I think about creative problem solving as creativity a little bit more. So in my mind, uh when I see, even in like thinking, somebody who is just able to like move their head and see it from a different view,
Hmm.
build a table a little bit differently, you know uh I think I that automatically to me is creativity.
Mm.
um but I don't really know. I think people, I love accounting,
Hmm.
and I really love Excel, and there's something about
Yes.
there's something about the way that accountants and people who love Excel
Yeah.
use it. Like,
Yeah.
for me, that is there is that, like, that to me is creativity, because there are these rules, and there are these boxes, and there are these things. And then there are
Hmm.
people who are like, I see it, I understand it, and I'm gonna just move it like slightly or
Yeah.
whatever, and
Yeah.
I think that's what I mean when I say creative problem solving. But it is the like it and creativity is kind of anything that you're willing to like push a little bit,
Hmm.
or do something a little bit differently, even if it's within your own bounds, right?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
I don't have to be the one to be like, that's creative. It's like,
Right.
whatever your bounds are, as long as you're kind of moving that needle and it's
Hmm.
exciting to you, like,
Hmm.
I'll let that be creative. I mean, I think it's why we think kids are so creative, because their
Hmm.
boundaries are real small.
Yeah.
So, their boxes are real little. That's all they know. And so they get so excited when they're like, and then it's a hot dog. And you're like, yeah,
Yeah.
so creative, so thrilled. Um, but yeah, I think there's more of a like an interior
Mm.
view of creativity.
Hmm.
Of I don't know, you cook something new and it's different for you. Like, that's
Hmm.
thrilling.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's your own version of creativity.
And that's such an open and accessible way of thinking of creativity too, where there's a lot of conversations where people are like, I am not creative. And what they mean is, I don't draw realistic pictures, or I don't, and they just don't open their thinking to like, well, creativity comes in these different ways. Like, it's how, as a teacher, it might be how you help this one student who's struggling. You think of a different way to give them the information or show them the information. That's creativity. But people, it's not widely recognized, maybe, and that's why they're not seeing it for themselves.
I think even for myself, it was so hard. I didn't, it was hard for me to say, like, kind of even move into this space, or like I still don't really feel comfortable about being like, hi, I'm an artist.
Oh, tell
Um,
me about this.
but, and a lot of that I think comes from exactly what you're talking about. Like, I don't know how to draw a cube. It's one of the most frustrating things, especially for people when I'm trying to explain something to them and I don't know how to draw in 3D. I don't know how to, I get really overwhelmed with that idea of creativity. And I
Mhm.
think it's why in the past, like, maybe since I graduated, or have gotten to meet more creative folks, have kind of opened that up and wanted to let more people in. Because for me,
Mhm.
it was very much like, yeah, can't draw. I can't really make straight pots. Like,
Mhm.
that there is a lot of my practice that is not maybe traditional in, or like technically skilled.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that it's it's one of those things that like, yeah, folks who are feel as if they're not creative is based on the expression. You know, even what you were talking about, it's all about like, well, like it's other people have done. It's like, yeah, everybody's done everything. Like,
Yeah.
are you interested? You know, are you enjoying this?
Yeah.
Because that's kind of, you know, you don't have to be a visionary. You can.
Well, and even you said the phrase, I'm not technically skilled. And then what comes to my mind is by whose standards?
Oh, you know, technically, I mean, by every university standards, I would say, by every institution, teaching institution standards. Um, or, you know, I got very nervous because somebody was asking me about like the clay I use.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I use bottled glazes and I use clay
Yeah.
from Standard, and it's never been vitrified because I like it at a certain temp, and I don't know what that temperature is. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
there's like a little bit that I'm missing, and I always feel a little nervous about that, especially in such a
Yeah.
craft medium where
Yeah.
people are so knowledgeable, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
Terrace
Mm-hmm.
gelada, like interesting, new to me. Um, so yeah, I see I maybe it's more specifically because it's craft and ceramics,
Yeah.
but I see very people who are great with porcelain, or they're, you know,
Sure.
there is a craft, there is literally a craft to ceramics,
Definitely.
and it those are technical skills that like are very important,
Mm-hmm.
but aren't things I held on to very
Well, and
tightly.
I often think too, I can't remember who I spoke with. It was an artist way early in my career, but also, but thinking like, what are the things that I want to spend my time learning and knowing? And what are the things that I don't really need to know in order to make the expression that I want to make? And being able to let go with that, let go of that, like feeling like I should, and being at peace with like, well, I don't actually need this information. Like some people will want it, but that doesn't mean I need it in order to do the thing I want to do with it. But that's hard because there is a lot of pressure on the outside to be like, know this, and try to
Yeah,
get there. And but you don't always need it. People are probably going to hate that I say that, but
I
I
know.
I feel it though. But I feel it. I truly feel it. I feel like you don't need it though in order to accomplish some things.
Yeah, you know, uh, speaking of Patsy, sh- going to Northridge was I went to Northridge
Yeah, let's talk
for
about
a
that.
year,
Northridge is in
year and a half,
California too for
Cal State
people, right?
Northridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a, it's a, it was a great balance of being taught by people who knew the craft,
Hmm.
and then being surrounded by people who were in other mediums and were also masters of their craft.
Hmm.
And so understanding that like, well, I didn't really need to know how to build a pedestal, like somebody
Hmm.
else knows how to build a pedestal and they are going to be very good at it.
Yes,
Or
very good.
if I'm interested in iron casting, like somebody will walk me through it and they'll pour it. Like I don't need to put on the whole ass suit. Like somebody else is very good at it and will make this way better. And
Yeah.
I got to make friends with people who were way better at their own things than I was, and
Hmm.
got to be like, how do you do that? Great. Like
Yeah.
if you already know, I don't need to know about 75 types of cyanic, like of a glue, you know,
Yeah.
and but you do, and that is so cool. And thank you so much. And
Hmm.
um and I think it's, you know, sometimes I wonder because LA is like so film heavy,
Hmm.
and you really do rely on people. Like A, you're not allowed to pick up a hammer on a set, but B, somebody else can do that significantly better and safer. Call
Hmm.
them over, they'll do it, they'll paint that wall. Like, you
Hmm.
know, don't ruin this for everybody.
Hmm.
um but yeah, getting to have that, and then even going to Cranbrook, it was, there are people who are so good at things
Hmm.
and they're so smart.
Well, and before we hit record, we were talking about Patsy Cox because you and I both know her and just like what a community connector she is. And um, so, in a way, like what you're also describing is utilizing your community to create the things you want to create. And that, you know, that has its own gift too, right? Instead of doing everything solo, you're working with others, you're collaborating, you're learning from them, they're learning from you, because you're going to ask a question because you don't have that craft knowledge per se. You might ask a question that opens up a new way of thinking for them in the process too. So there's like a beautiful exchange, not only in just community, but also in knowledge. And could you tell us a little more? I feel like we jumped off and I was like, oh,
I
wait,
know.
we did, which is so how I love it though. Truly, I love it. But I was going to say, maybe we should like bump back just a little bit and run us through how you came into where you are today, like in terms of study and places. And then you mentioned a Hollywood set. And so then I'm like, have you worked on
No.
a set? Like, what is that? So just maybe give us a synopsis of kind of how you came to where you are today in terms of education experience, moving around this country and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I moved to LA. I moved to and went to a school called Loyola Marymount University right by the airport. Um, and went to school for psychology, and I had taken pottery in high school and was like, great, I'll knock my art credit out. Um,
I'll knock
and
my art
worked
credit out.
and had a really great teacher who also is a Cranbrook alum named Julie. And she was just so lovely and really encouraged me to, there was another teacher who was there whose name is Tom Mueller,
Mhm.
who, also is a really incredible ceramicist. And now I think, runs the ceramics department at USC. And I
Mm.
think he definitely does. And he's doing a great job. And encouraged me to take a class with Tom. And he was teaching like a 3D design class. And um, I sort of just kept taking art classes
Mhm.
at Loyola after that. And he was very encouraging. And, I was still not an art student in any way. And it's not a BFA program, it was just a BA program. And kind of kept, telling me to take classes, asking what I was doing, what I was up to, what I was going to do after
Mm.
graduation. And I'd stayed around and worked at the school and taken extension classes there. And throughout that time was in that like, do I go and work in schools as a school therapist, psychologist, or do I, like take a chance? And he really kind of posed it as a,
Mm.
you could fail at this now. Like you could
Yeah.
try, and if you fail now, like you fail now. And or if you could see yourself being okay with just doing this as a hobby,
Mm.
that's okay too. But if you can't see this as just being a hobby, you know, you
Oh,
let me he gave me just the clearest path towards
yeah.
going to a grad school. So encouraged me to apply to Northridge, which has a really great post-bac program with Patsy.
Mhm.
um and yeah, that helped me, kind of was like my first jump into not just making like pots in a big studio at a
Yeah.
university. Um and yeah, Northridge kind of was that. I'm truly the friends I just visited this weekend were
Mhm.
people I met there, and are just met the sweetest people and got to
Mm.
learn about things like Ensika and
Mhm.
mold making
Mhm.
and chrome,
Chrome.
which were not things I knew. Like they're not teaching that at a BA program. Um, which then led me to Cranbrook. There's a few Cranbrook alum at
Mhm.
Northridge. Tom is a Cranbrook alum, and
Mhm.
was very secretly, I think, rooting for me to go there because
Oh,
he had such a great experience.
yeah.
And I'm not a strong class taker,
Mm.
and yeah, I think the program was a really helpful kind of way for me to move into art.
Was like a good
Um,
match.
yeah, it was the school I wanted, but the school that I was really nervous about because it's got all this air around it. and
Yeah.
and I was, I had made my first portfolio of my life.
Yeah.
So it was one of those nerve-wracking things. But moved to Michigan to work under a wonderful human named Anders Ruwald,
Mhm. Mhm.
who has since left. I was lucky I got him the last 2 years that he was at Cranbrook.
Mhm.
Um, And, he kind of framed it in the beginning of like, think of this as a residency, a little bit of
Mm,
what we'll probably jump into of like, think of this as 2 years to build a studio practice, to figure out how you
mm.
work and just concentrate on being here.
Oh,
And just try to, do your best to just try to be here. There's going to be so many other things that are going on, but if
mm-hmm,
you could just try to do these 2 years,
mm-hmm,
and try to build a framework.
mm.
And the other great thing about that school is there's no like proper education. Actually, I can't say there's no proper education. That's going to take away their accreditation.
Not what you meant.
But yeah, but you learn what you want to learn and you take what you
Yeah.
want to take from that school. So there are people, like we've been saying, who have all of these skills,
Mm-hmm,
and you kind of learn from each other.
mm-hmm,
My friends are really great at firing those fancy blow kilns, and I learned a lot about firing blow kilns, and I learned a
mm-hmm,
lot about building really big, and I
mm-hmm,
learned about working with porcelain. And you
mm-hmm.
know the more friends you made, the more you learned about
Mm,
different bits of craft. And
yeah.
it was a very much like, somebody here knows how to do that, and if they don't
Yeah.
know how to do it, they know somebody who knows how to do it.
Yeah.
And it was just this growing resource of people. And really, I think because there are not classes and professors that have knowledge coming this way,
Yeah.
you really were forced to learn to build with other people. You could do it
Mm-hmm.
on your own, and a lot of people
Sure.
thrived, sort of focusing in on their practice. But I think it was really conducive to me wanting to be like, hi, do you want to like sit at a movie theater for 7 hours because we can't do anything else, you know?
So did you like what I'm a little curious more about their program. So were there any classes like that you had to take and go and sit in and like lecture classes or anything like that that was required? Or is it much more like independent study, truly like you're like, this is the topic I'm going to investigate for this period of time, or this is the thing?
So every department is a little bit different,
Mm-hmm.
and it might have changed where there are a few lectures that you have to attend throughout the year, probably for the accreditation. But when I was there, the only like actual requirements were you had to show up to crits, or at least in the ceramics department, you had to show up to every crit, which was maybe once a week, once every other week.
Mm-hmm.
You had to have your work crit once a
Mm-hmm.
year, and you had to show up for there's a first year review and a second year review.
Mm-hmm.
You have to turn in a book and show up at thesis show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those were it. So there
Okay.
are the requirements were a framework.
Yeah.
What you read, I think we had like readings, but they were very like, maybe you didn't read it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it really was a like, if you want to actively participate in every crit,
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to write for some of the crits too, so practicing some writing skills about other people's work.
Sure.
um but not really so much other than that. So
Mm-hmm.
I um I got to like, I wanted to learn about other artists and all of that. So I spent most of my time in the library. They have a really incredible, if you ever get to see their library, the school is beautiful, but the library is like just incredible. And the person who
Oh.
runs it is the most knowledgeable person. Um, I think Judy Dykey still runs it, but and then you can like sign up for electives. So even though it's in
Mm-hmm.
ceramics, I sat in a lot of print media crits and got to do sculpture crits and got to go to fibers and hear what they were talking about. So
Mm. Oh, how
mo
interesting. Yeah, because you're getting to hear other mediums talk about the way they talk about their work. And that
yeah,
we don't get to do that a lot actually in
it's
study.
either in the context of ceramic, viewing a
Yeah.
painting in the context of ceramics, but to hear painters talk about paintings, like
Yeah.
that's not my language, and that's not my visual vocabulary, and was a really, gave me, you I think added to that, like, okay, their an expression is going to be really wide, and the
Hmm.
way that the things that we prioritize in our medium is just like a wide breadth.
Hmm.
also to like learn about, I maybe took an art history class, but I didn't pay attention well enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so to learn about references that other people were talking to about,
Mm.
or artists that they were interested in and how it fed into their practice was like, an education I couldn't have really expected.
Yeah. There's a lot to learn from that when somebody is, there's, as you know, and other people know too, it's just the sheer quantity of artists and people to be inspired by is
Yeah.
intense and massive, and it's impossible to know them all. And I know I used to teach a gen ed art 100, like introduction to visual art, and I just remember people would I say, do you know this artist? And I was, you have to say like, no, I'm sorry, I don't know that artist, but I'm going to look
Yeah.
them up now. And it's just, there's just so many to know about. And there's so many obscure ones, and which can feel overwhelming. And, there's that whole thing of like, everything's already been done. I think you said that maybe earlier when we were talking, or everyone has made everything. And there's that. And then there's like the counter of that is like, but not you, like you haven't made that. And so then that's where the wonderful, like, possibilities come in for a person. Like it's very freeing to think like, yeah, there's all these things, but I haven't done it yet. So what would I do with that? What would be my interpretation? I want to go back to something you said. I think it was Anders said it to you. That is Anders or Anders? Does he say Anders?
I think it's actually somewhere in the middle, but
Okay.
I'm gonna say
We'll go Anders for now.
yeah.
We'll call that. We'll just, sorry if it's not. But you said he said to use this time to learn what your studio practice is like and to understand, like to set up how that is, how you work. Can you tell us more about that? Like what did that mean for you? What did you learn about how you work during that time?
Yeah, he was a practicing, the people who run the department are also practicing artists,
Mhm.
and at that point, a decade or two career, and
Mhm.
um kept instilling, or a few times sort of instilled the longevity of a practice. And so during that time, it was okay, am I somebody, I had a friend who would go into the studio at 8 a.m. every morning, because the thing that she liked, and this is the thing we learned over the year, was over like our first year, was if nobody's in the studio, she'd rather wake up at 4 a.m. and be in the studio when nobody's in
Mhm.
there. I can work in 1 hour spurts. I
Mm.
have the attention of just like a little puppy, and I'll make a thing, I'll bop around, I'll get
Mhm.
a tea, I'll come back.
Mhm.
Uh, one of the artists that I worked with, or that was there with me, is named Wade Touye, who's also
Mhm.
really incredible.
Mhm.
He and I would go on full adventures. Like we'd go to Home Depot for like an hour and a half and walk around, or we'd just be like, I have to get out of here and go and get a brownie together.
Mm.
Um, and when we were, and then I think we ended up both being people who worked pretty late at night. But
Mm.
yeah, it was one of those things that like, if because we were there, we got to figure out like, you know what, I'd rather spend 14 hours at the studio today and do 1 hour of work
Mhm.
than I'm just not a person that can put headphones on and work for
Mhm.
14 hours straight, or
Mhm.
even 5 hours straight.
Mhm. Mhm.
I learned I can't read in the studio. Like,
Mm. Yeah.
I also love liquids. So I have like a tea, a coffee, a water, and like maybe a Gatorade. But then, it was also that I like set my studio up how I wanted. I like to be near windows. I like to
Yeah.
take naps.
Mhm.
A lot of this is gonna sound like a kitten or a puppy. And
They have a
um
pretty good life, so I don't know. It
I
seems like a good one to
know, right?
emulate.
But there was the freedom because there were no classes. And I think
Mm.
that's sort of what he was getting at, and why there wasn't a lot that we were like required to
Mhm.
do, was because you're not going to be required to do anything
Yeah.
outside of
Yeah.
school. Like, yes, you have to go to work and the life things, but nobody is saying I expect you to be there from 9 to 5.
No.
You don't have to be there 3 hours a day. Show up once a week. Like,
Mhm.
you're gonna have to figure out how you work best, and a lot of that freedom was both overwhelming and in the end really fruitful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, I think that's why I say like it kind of worked out for me. And even when you said independent study, I was like, it's a bit of independent study, but nobody's even like, you have to focus on like they're,
Yeah.
if you
It's
wanted to be
really
like,
how
this
it
is
is
what
in
I'm
real life.
interested.
Yeah.
It really isn't. And we had to request, like, he was like, these are times when we can have studio visits. You don't have to have a studio visit. You never have to meet with me. But if
Mm.
you want to, you have to reach out. And his incredible wife, Marie Herwald Herman, if you don't know Marie,
I
I mean,
don't, so I'm gonna look her up.
I'll shout both of them out. They're both incredible and wonderful. I got to work with Marie in the years afterwards. So, but Marie Herwald Herman is his partner and would also like pop in and be like, if you want to do a studio visit, we can. And not everybody took advantage of that. And I wouldn't say I took advantage of all of the artists in residence or all of the visiting artists either, but it was just one of those like, okay, like here's a platter of options. Like the
Mm-hmm.
level in which you want to participate is the level in which you get things out of your practice. Is kind of how it felt. Like
Yeah.
that was it looking around, especially afterwards, it really was a like, yeah, there's options, like make a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really want to get into it, you can. And if
Mm-hmm.
you just want to take this time and get a great degree and have some wonderful work, like
Mm-hmm.
you can do that too. If you just want to use the big old kilns, like that's
Mm-hmm.
great too.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he did a great job of, we always had visiting artists, and his partner was pretty like available, and she was a different perspective on talking about your work.
Mm.
And yeah, yeah, I don't really know where to end other than like,
Well, yeah, I guess I'm kind of wondering, you
choose your own
mentioned like,
adventure.
yeah, I love choose your own adventure books. They're so fun. You had mentioned that even with all this openness, it did feel overwhelming at times. So could you talk about that too? Like what happened when the overwhelm feeling came, or what did it look like? Like what shape did it take?
Yeah, sometimes it meant that we would like, I think one time we drove down to Detroit and tried to see like all of the openings of one weekend because it really felt like we needed to be there,
Yeah.
even though it was like, no, and we could have seen it later. And
Mm-hmm.
and there was like there was a lot of like big busyness and then like absolutely nothing to do,
Mm.
and kind of trying to balance yourself in that. So there were times that I would spend the whole day at the studio and not make a single thing when I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to, because I
Mm-hmm.
was distracted by like getting snacks or like
Mm-hmm.
talking to somebody about a thing. And
Mm-hmm.
another wonderful rule we had that was not everybody loved, but when you had headphones on, no one could talk
Yes.
to you. I mean,
Yes.
a classic. I think it's across the board. It kind of
Yes.
exists everywhere.
Yep.
But um my friend who yeah, Anjali was very like steadfast about like headphones. She's
Yep.
so nice and she's so generous, but she was really, really good about setting
The
times and
boundary.
boundaries for herself
Mm-hmm.
that I think I still look at and I'm like, yeah, there's like,
She
she's the one that would come in
prioritized.
early. She really did. And she knew
Yeah.
how to prioritize her practice in
Yeah.
a way that continues to like, even so I'm staying with her, and like even now she's like, yeah, I'm gonna go and finish this. I was like, yeah, I'm still like eating a sandwich and I am just gonna keep eating this sandwich. Like I have 5 other things to do, but I like,
Yeah.
but getting to see somebody like that who like, she had a regimented time. She came in, she put her headphones on, she left when she was tired. Like she really
Mm-hmm.
understood what she needed. And
Mm.
then like Wade and I were a bit like, we want to do everything. And then we get so overwhelmed with trying to do everything. Then we'd be like, we're not going to talk to anybody. And I'm going to put like big old headphones on and be rude. And there was a lot of that oscillation between like going to every show and party and then like being like, that was too much, I can't keep doing
Mm.
that. And then
Mm-hmm.
there was one time where I was like reading a lot of books, and then like I just was reading books and not doing anything with that information, so my brain
Mm-hmm.
was just filled with like theories and people's writings in a way
Yeah.
that I was like, I don't know where I stand, like you
Yeah.
know?
Yes.
And so I think I like hit those big peaks and valleys,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd love to be like, chilling on a in the middle and settled, but it at least I got to see those, like, okay, it is I can go to two shows a
Yeah.
day. Like if I'm going to openings, two is kind of my max.
Yep.
Otherwise it's too much for
Yeah.
me. And I'm still kind of, working through lowering those highs and lows, but it really did look like
Mm.
panic, and then
Yeah.
guilt, and then kind of that big oscillation.
Well, and I read in your bio you were born and raised in Hawaii, and thinking about waves as being part of your whole life and existence too, I would imagine. And like that's there's highs and lows obviously with
Yeah, you
those
take
too.
some chances. You fall pretty hard. Yeah, there's it really is the it, being able to find sort of the middle of all of that, and being
Hmm.
able to kind of come back to a balance.
Hmm.
Because I think if you're taking a chance, in anything, you're gonna swing big at some point.
Hmm.
And sometimes you do great, and sometimes you fall really far. And so if
Hmm.
you can kind of figure out how to get between those two,
Hmm.
or at least settle yourself back into those two, it's a really helpful skill that I
Can
wish I
you?
had, and I'm still working on.
Yeah. Oh
Just as
my
just
God.
as I don't want anyone to think like she thinks she's got it.
She's got it. She knows how to prioritize right. She
Oh
gets
yeah,
her stuff where
she's
she
got her.
wants.
She puts her headphones on. She doesn't always apologize every time she takes them out. No.
She has 3 snacks a day and that's it. Can you tell us about a time that you said take big swings? I'm curious about those. What does a big swing look like for you in your practice or in your, as related to your creative practice?
um, I'll in school. Well, that's not really creative.
It can be.
Um, a very like the example that comes to the top of mind is I'm in a residency right now,
Mhm,
where I had to take 2 months off of work.
mhm,
I work at a nonprofit, and I do sort of public programming,
mhm,
um, and uh, yeah, I had to ask for leave of absence for a residency, and take a big financial swing. And I so far, like, in 5, 6 weeks in, and having 4 weeks in, having a great time. But it was one of those things that, thanks up to the residency, it could have meant that I lose my job, or
yeah.
uh maybe I could have hated being here, or come and really struggled with having like a full on focused practice again. I think I
Mhm,
haven't really had 2 months to not do anything but make,
mhm,
like, that.
mhm.
That's a privilege that you kind of only get either in school, or if even if you're a practicing artist, like.
When you're talking about having this job though and applying for residency, I want you to talk more about that. Like, how do you, because I think a lot of people will have jobs that aren't in the arts too, and think about like, how do I still maintain sort of a trajectory with my professional art practice while I have responsibilities in this other place? Like, what kind of nonprofit is it? Is it an arts nonprofit? So they're in the same field, or a different nonprofit?
It serves uh nonprofits in arts and culture. So
Mhm.
there's like there's like a bit of an awareness of arts, but it's more of so we re-grant, and we provide programs and do fiscal sponsorship. So we act
Okay.
as more of an intermediary service.
Hmm.
Um, and I, since I took this job, have been a bit struggling with figuring out a studio practice.
Hmm.
And I think I knew, even for myself, that since I've graduated, of like, if a good residency comes up, and like a big old nice opportunity that's chunky, and like this one's 7 weeks,
Hmm.
then I'm just gonna figure it out and do
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
That is the priority for the way that I want to like have a studio practice.
Yeah.
And so I've always applied to residencies, and this has been the, like, this a one that was worth asking for a leave
You really
from
wanted
my
it.
job. Yeah, I really
Yeah.
wanted it. And I know it's also with economic times is not the best time to say that I could always get a job,
Right.
but as strongly as I feel about like my career and the way I make my money and that sort of growing, I also know like I still am prioritizing having a practice. And
Mm.
for me, it also meant like, okay, if I'm working at this job where I'm not really able to have a daily practice, then I'll save it
Mm.
up and I'll do a big residency.
Mm.
And I feel fine with that. And
Yeah.
I feel I'm pretty lucky that they gave me a leave. I want to give my boss the credit of saying yes, but also I a little bit had I just said I was going to a residency and if they I didn't really ask, so I had already accepted and I just said like I'm going to this residency,
Mhm.
you know,
This is what I'm going to
regardless of
do.
the situation,
Yeah.
like could I have a leave and know that I have a job when I come back, which not
Mm.
everybody has that privilege to do.
Sure.
Um but it, I'm also in the position of I kind of was going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And when I apply to residencies, especially ones that I really want,
Mhm.
um, I'll save. I really am saying that, and I hope it doesn't it doesn't come back and bite me of the like I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But I also think I've got friends who have done residencies and figured it out,
Mhm.
and there are enough people around me where I feel supported in,
Mhm.
if I needed a short-term job, they would help me find a short-term
Yeah.
job. If I need,
You
there's
have a net of support that's
yeah,
there.
that
Yeah.
that really helps me feel like I can take a chance and be like, okay, I'm staying with a friend like
Yep.
who has been I literally called her and I was like, hey, like, is it okay if I stay with you? And she was like, I assumed you were. Like
Oh.
the second your name came through, I just assumed you were. And that, like, I was so anxious about being like, hi, can I stay? Like it's New York. It's
Yeah.
really hard to, it's like that's a huge ask
It's
to say with somebody.
yes. And it's
And
hard though, even as a residency, to try and find housing. I was talking with a friend who's working on setting up residencies, and I was like, if you can provide housing for the people coming, that is a huge relief. Like you will get more applicants because they'll know these things are taken care of for them.
yeah, and it's especially if you want people outside of the city. This one kind of
Yes.
a lot of the time has New York artists, and so y- having somewhere to stay is there's somewhere in Detroit called Ceramic School.
Mm,
Also look up Ceramic School. It's run
yeah.
by Henry Chrisman and Virginia Torrance. They're restarting the residency hopefully soon, but they have a duplex and the residents stay there and they work there. And Ceramic School is like the best
Mm,
studio. Um, uh, I am so fond of the both of them. Um, uh, but it having already kind of feeling like there are people who are excited with me is very
mhm.
nice, and it helps make me feel like I can just like try a little
Yeah.
bit even. um a great I have a friend from Cranbrook as well, and we write applications together because sometimes applications are really scary and
Yes.
it's really hard to start writing. And a lot of the times they're quite vulnerable just in terms of you being like, I really want this.
Yes.
And
Yes.
this is what I feel strongly about. And
Mhm.
so they're like so good about being like, okay, well, like, let's have a day where we're going to write together. And we've gotten really good at writing like in a Google Doc together. It's a bit of
Yes.
chaos, but both of us are a little
Yep.
like, "Ugh."
Yep.
But sometimes we'll just like talk about a project together or like write literally next to each other.
Mhm.
And at this point, they know everything I want to do and I know everything they want to do. And so it's really just a second voice.
That's
And
so
those sort of
smart.
things, it's a really incredible way to kind of encourage like they're a photographer. Also, they
Mhm.
take all my photos. So the photos that I sent you are by Claire Gatto, who
Oh,
but it I think it's a big reason why I even applied to this residency or apply to any
yeah.
grants,
Yeah.
because there is somebody who is like, I'll read it. If you want me to read
Yeah.
that over, like I'll take a look. Like send it to me today and I'll read it tomorrow. And that's a huge thing when you're applying for anything.
Yes.
it's scary. I don't really know how you feel about applying for
It's,
grants or, asking people for favors. Like,
yeah, it
I
is.
don't
I think
know.
the vulnerability of it is really real because you're expressing a desire for something you want and that you might get rejected from, and then somebody will bear witness to knowing that you wanted it and didn't get it. And that's a really hard human experience to
Yeah.
have. And if you and you're right about the writing too. Like I like having writing partners who I know I can put the spew out and they're going to understand that that's my spewed version of my thoughts. And then they can look at it and they can say like, oh, here's the core of what you're saying. This is the key thing. Pull this out. And, but it is a trust building thing to have with somebody to be like, okay, this person's not going to judge me for my first draft. And like, in a way, those are the kind of people I always want in my life, is like the ones that aren't going to judge me for my
Absolutely.
first draft, which is also like, don't judge me for my worst decisions. It's all of those things like
For
together.
sure. Yeah, it's really, I think the writing part of being an artist isn't quite
Yeah.
focused on in the way that, right? Because I mean, I'd
You
love
write
if
a
my images
ton.
did everything. Like,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be incredible if someone just looked at it and was like, I got it. I get exactly what you're talking about. Like, let
Yes.
me tell you, like, wow, that's crazy. That's amazing. I'd love that. But
Hmm.
the reality is, like, if you want a grant, you've got to write.
Yes.
And it workshops that I've gotten to be a part of, or, it's the you got to write like 7 pages and then like have a friend highlight some key topic
Yeah.
sentences and then
Yeah.
have that lead what you're writing, or however your process is.
Yeah.
But it is writing and rewriting and rewriting. It's a
Hmm.
master artist statement that changes and you pick based
Yes.
on what you're applying to. And
Yes.
it's the concept of cover letters as well for people who are applying to maybe more traditional jobs.
Hmm.
But you've got to have a like 3 project proposals that you
Hmm.
have that you keep
Hmm.
applying to different things with.
Hmm.
um and it's for artists, especially visual artists,
Hmm.
not a skill.
Yeah.
I know some artists who are incredible writers. Claire's has gotten really clear on what they're interested in, but
Hmm.
it takes so long for you to be like, because you're like, I made it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And
And
people
it's
are like,
not,
no.
and outside of the artist's statement, there isn't a lot of practice in writing in traditional art training. Like there isn't. I mean, art history, you do a bit in there depending on the program, but those are research writing. It's you're researching, you build thesis and you're writing to it. It's different than it feels different to me than writing a grant proposal, although there's research in it. It feels different because
I,
it's only about your own work. It's not about somebody else you're studying and observing from a side, unless you can kind of build that in your own way of working. Like, can you observe your own work?
I think it's a hard thing to, and there's, I've been thinking about artist statements in 2 ways, which I used to work with an org called Bulk Space, who are
Mm,
still around and are
hmm.
really incredible. And we ran this workshop where we were talking about artist statements, and we sort of landed on like, there are artist statements for you to write for your own practice. And
Hmm.
then there's more like institutional grant
Hmm.
focused artist statements. So what is it you care about, and how do you figure out how to talk about what you want?
Hmm.
And then when you're telling other people about it, how do you get them on the same page, right?
Hmm.
So one is from your perspective, and the other one is assuming somebody has no idea
Hmm.
what you're talking about.
Hmm.
And I thought that was such a lovely way to kind of like build a practice of like,
Hmm.
oh, I should be able to say, like, these are the 10 things I like, even if it's a list, like,
Hmm. Yeah.
even if it's just pictures of like my artist statement would be then just like literally just like clips from movies, or like,
Yeah.
just a long list of things.
Yeah.
But that helps drive my practice of figuring out why it is I like the thing I like.
Hmm.
And there is some vocalizing around, there's some vocalizing that needs to be done when
Hmm.
you're making things, especially objects.
Yeah.
And then there is the other side, which is like, you have no idea what I make, and I have to kind of give you a glimpse
Yeah.
and really try to be crystal clear in the way I speak.
Yep.
But both of those, having like a few friends
Hmm.
who maybe either understand your writing style or make work
Mm-hmm.
that gets it,
Mm-hmm.
pretty valuable, pretty invaluable. Like, or not,
Totally.
I get to read grants as part of my work, and a lot of it I'm just like, oh, I wish somebody had written what do you mean here above it,
Yeah.
just a couple of sentences of like,
Mm-hmm.
I love to write. I love to write and I love to talk in metaphors. That doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean anything to people. Nobody knows what I mean when I'm just like gesturing wildly, Um, there has to be substance to it that somebody else can relate to when you
Yeah.
are writing for other people
Yeah.
versus writing for yourself. I'm sure you have your own writing practice that is just for
Mm-hmm.
your heart and soul, and
Yeah.
maybe a super vulnerable place.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
There's this practice that came from a dance choreographer named Liz Lehrman, where you start with "I'm interested in," and then you just keep going. And like, I love that as a prompt, like, because it's not focused on your creative practice. It's just, what are you interested in? I'm interested in, and it can be mundane. It can be exquisitely, subtle. It can be grand. We can be interested in so many things. And from there's a lot of like, sometimes I do that exercise with the intention of seeking, in a way. Like, I'm seeking to find out what the next thing is I want to work on. And so by writing out, like, I'm
Oh,
interested
interesting.
in, then I'll find like, oh, you know what? There's this like pattern right now. I'm interested in this thing. And so maybe that's where I head next. And so I use it as a seeking tool rather than always like, so it like reveals in a way that I can't figure out on my own. I really love that as an
Yeah.
exercise and prompt to do with some regularity, just like once a year, try to run through that.
Yeah, that's a really great kind of way to maybe get out of not a funk, but just, sort of be a remotivation of like,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, like you're saying, you feel like you're just kind of making the same thing in different
Mm-hmm.
iterations, and
Mm-hmm.
what is it you're actually trying to make? And what it
Mm-hmm.
sounds like is that kind of parses out like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
if I have some language around it, what I'm actually interested in is
Mm-hmm. Is
this
this?
this bigger thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question for you kind of related to this. This is when I ask a lot of people, but what is a creative challenge you often face?
Hyper specific to ceramics, it's going to be glaze.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that's what you meant, but
Yeah, it can be
um,
anything.
I really struggle with um, color. I like a shape, and I wish
Mm-hmm.
that is all that mattered, but I
Mm,
understand it's not. Right.
mm,
So there are choices with unglazing. There's choices behind using a certain type of clay or
mm-hmm.
glaze. These are all choices, and I don't ever know how to make that final choice.
Mm,
That is like the place that I continue to struggle with,
mm,
of what a thing is seen as,
mm,
maybe. um I there's a there it for me there it feels like there's a lot of history and weight behind how clay objects are finished,
mm-hmm.
especially when they relate to functionality. I had somebody be like, are you worried about it not being food safe? And I was like, well, I've never considered another person using this before. Like,
Yeah.
which, I mean, it was a legit question,
Yeah.
like if I'm selling to somebody to use as an object, I was like, oh, I have not thought about that one day. Like, try not to let the orange juice sit in it. Like, I don't
Yeah.
really know.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and yeah, that is something I'm
Mm,
actively struggle with, and don't really know a solution to, of
mm,
the final finish of a ceramic object.
mm. Because in your mind, you see it just as the form, whatever it is that you've created, or do you see something in your head, but you can't find the match for it?
No, I kind of just see it as the form. I've
Mm,
been trying to use the same clay, like just a classic speckled clay.
mm-hmm.
Because terracotta has it. I think I am weighed down by histories around
Mm,
clay, and what that means and what they reference, and
mm,
I don't know how to make choices around it. For a while, I would just fully go. You might know about stroking coat. I really
mm-hmm.
love
Yeah, I
stroking
do.
coat
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
a bottle plays, and for me, that was the quick answer of this is just as goofy as it looks, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's like, but every finished ceramic object has a thing associated with it. And so it's hard for me to make that choice because I don't really, maybe what it is I haven't quite found the choice, the glaze, the high gloss, the unfinished, the bisque, whatever it is that feels like it matches the intention. But yeah, I really don't, I have not landed anywhere other than I just leave things unglazed.
Yeah.
But that's also a choice that is hard for me.
Yeah, no, it's just so interesting to think about. I have like 3 questions at one time in my head, but I'm thinking about like, okay, let me form the right question that is coming first. You were talking about feeling weighed down about the history of some clays or of clay and maybe even glaze. What responsibility, and that might not be quite the right word, but do you really have to that weighted history that others might bring to the piece that you don't hold? Like, is that history and those perspectives, is that something that you also believe in, or is that something that somebody else is putting onto it?
I mean, I think it's 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 both, because obviously I believe in it if I'm kind of,
Yeah.
continuing it.
Yeah.
And that's such a good question. Yeah, it's something I keep holding on to, and I think it's because how I look at work, especially
Mhm.
ceramic work, and um I sometimes I struggle to see a connection between the way it's finished and the shape of an object. And
Mm.
because so much of my current work is based literally on the form,
Yeah.
it is so hard for me to see beyond the form.
Hmm.
And then I think it's more what I put on things, right?
Mm.
Because most people aren't walking around being like, oh, a Malalica, like, of course I get it. Let's go, is this a Chinese porcelain? Like, most people aren't putting that onto work
Hmm.
necessarily.
Hmm.
And so it must be something that I hold on to that I really struggle recontextualizing to fit into
Hmm.
my practice.
Hmm.
Because I can't really see, I guess I just can't really see past it, and
Mm.
um which is, yeah, it's just really making me think, because most of the people around me usually are not necessarily ceramicists, so they just see like a glossy white
Uh-huh.
outfit, or they're just
Yeah.
like, ooh, it's like brown.
Yeah.
um, which is great and helpful. And yeah, oof, I wish I had a better answer.
No,
It's
well,
a
it's
thing that
something,
I
it's tricky though, because it's like there is like, yeah, just like there is like, because you know the history, you've been educated in this materials history and practice. Do you then have like, does that become your responsibility then to use these things with that knowledge and care? But also, like, do you have to be beholden to that history?
oh, you're asking the question that like sits in my uncomfort around using ceramics, and maybe my like what's a good word, um I don't, not a fraud, but right. So even as we were talking before, and me saying something about like I'm not technically very skilled
Yeah.
in ceramics, like I think I hold a lot of like uncomfortableness because I use the medium that there are people who care a lot and who should, rightfully
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
And I haven't picked a side, and I feel a little uncomfortable on that, right? So
Oh, yeah.
I love Joanne Greenbaum is a great painter. She uses ceramic and clay and color, and kind of is like, it's a thing to get to a thing. And
Yes.
I'm so obsessed with that.
Yeah.
And then I'm also living in this like, yeah, but I love when it's fired to cone 4, and I love this mag, like, so like
Yeah.
I think I'm hearing as I'm talking to you of struggling like between both of
Yeah.
those spaces of like, I don't really care about people calling it terracotta. Just call it red clay. Literally
Yeah.
nobody cares. And or you know, or is it
Yes.
fired? Is it not fired? Is it vitrified? Like who for? And then the other side of me that's like, well, you got to make sure that it's like vitrified enough, or you know, that it's a whatever. And
It's stable. It's going to be in play.
yeah, and it'll travel, and the handle will break off, and which again, like in the and so I am like either refusing to pick a side or just really struggling with both of those things as I
Yeah.
make decisions.
Yeah.
Holding on to like and they don't have to be separate. They're a little
Right.
bit more of a round circle
Yeah.
than anything, you know, and
Yeah.
I'm like just pulled a little bit towards each side each time. And in glazing or in finishing a work, really like I
You're
guess
over here more,
over
maybe.
here
Yeah.
way more than I am
Yeah.
just like brown. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Have you ever given yourself the problem or the challenge of like, okay, I'm going to go in and work as if I am the painter that you like? Like you just
oh,
like that. And I'm asking because I think I
mhm.
have that as you're articulating the struggle. I think I have that a similar dialogue in my head often. And I think, and it also relates back, it might have been before we were recording, but children and the way that children explore and they just like dive in and dig in and do. And
Yeah.
there's something so appealing about that. And it sort of feels like once you know a little bit, it's harder to like move back to that, just go in and do, because you're like, you have this other little voice that's hanging out here telling you like these things to think about.
Absolutely. I literally when you were talking, I was like, oh, that would be so brave. Which, you know, not really, but like the willingness to kind of just be like, I say out loud it's all about the form. But the
Uh-huh.
reality of that is that I am always worried about the finish
Yeah.
and you know, and how it's being used, which that's not the point in what I'm saying and what my
Nothing you sent
intentions
me,
are.
none of your images you
Ugh.
sent me make me think about like how we're using these things. They're like they're very sculptural. And so like
Yeah,
what's going on?
it is a thing that so for a little while there's just a really like basic baby blue wash that I used to put on everything. So I would just
Hmm.
use I would just use like a speckly clay, put this baby blue wash on everything, and I was like, that's my solution to focusing on form is I'm
Hmm.
just gonna um Anjali, and if you Google Anjali, I think it's probably under Studio Anjali for her
Okay.
thesis project, made this really great textured blue pots and
Mm.
was focusing on the form and kind of it's hard though, right? Because then it became a little designy, but tried
Yeah.
to mute that conversation around color and focus on form, or
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
mute a conversation around finish. But yeah, there's a part of me that really would like lately have been trying to just do form things and just leave them unglazed and be like,
Hmm.
I chose the best clay for, you know, the
Hmm.
clay is the clay because it's
This
the
is
best
it.
clay to build,
Yeah.
and try to be fine with it. I wish I settled. I literally just I fired it all the way to 10 and then put glaze on it afterwards and like reglazed it because I was insecure. um, Even though I like liked it just fine, I was like, oh, it's like supposed to be for tomato soup. So I got very overwhelmed. Um, but wish that I could have lived a little bit more on that. Like, you know, it's like
I think you need to
every
make
day.
before we said this is for tomato soup, like maybe leave one unglazed and then the title is this is not for tomato soup.
It's never. Oh, a perfect. I just make two of everything, and especially if it's going to be an acidic food, I just be like, this one's not for coffee.
Yes.
There's no coffee. Do not let your coffee sit in this mug.
Just make a mug that says not for coffee.
Not for coffee. For everything but coffee. I mean, no acidic things. No hot tomato
Just
soup
water.
and hot coffee. Yeah, yeah, and low alkaline water. Just
Yes. A whole list of disclaimers
yes.
on the bottom. One thing I want to ask you though right now, oh, I know. What stops you from creating?
Um, I would say two things. One, existential, which is I get because I have like a 9 to 5 job,
Mhm.
I just get uh like mentally tired, and
Mhm.
then I get overwhelmed that then it gets in my head that I'm mentally tired, and then I don't want to go to my studio if I'm just going to sit there.
Mhm.
Um and because that's not really how I work in my studio. I if I'm not working, I'll just go home or go somewhere else.
Mhm.
Um and then it sort of keeps building, and it's really hard for me to um start up again. It's almost like a
Mhm.
diet or exercising or any of
Mhm.
those things. Once I've overthought, oh, it's been 7 days and that
Mhm.
thing that I was working on is now dry, and then I'm just like I'm making all these excuses for myself. And
Mhm.
then I feel bad about making those excuses, and now I'm like tumbling to the bottom of the hill.
Mhm.
And so that I really struggle with. And then the other really practical thing is that my studio is in a kind of spooky building right now,
Okay.
and it's not actually spooky. It's not well kept.
Yeah.
It's kind of a dirty building. It's a
Mhm.
super affordable, but just not somewhere I like to go. And so it's really
Mhm.
hard to go because I don't like to be there.
Oh,
I
yeah.
the studio itself there's big old windows, but the idea of going there and not being able to use the bathroom or get multiple drinks, like it just doesn't
Mm.
feel
It doesn't encourage your
comfy.
creativity. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of those, and it's I'm a real like my desk is a whole situation. I
Mhm.
like things where they are, and I'm
Mhm.
very specific with my surroundings and my
Mhm.
environment, and have gotten pretty fortunate to like have it set up like that, because not
Yeah.
everyone gets to. Some people
Right.
have to put everything in a box and
Yeah.
be
In and out,
adjustable.
in
And
and out. Yeah.
yeah, and I feel really lucky in that, like, I have a table, and this table has
Mhm.
been with me since 2014,
Mhm.
2015, and I move it wherever I go, and I hang my things where they go. But um having to park in that parking lot and walk up those spooky stairs is like, I'm just like, no. And sometimes it smells, and I was just like, no, I'll just go home. And
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of creative, or a lot of folks who maybe work in objects, really like a table set up a certain way, or like I see the wall
I
behind
am.
you and you
Yeah.
have visually the things you need. I'm sure your pencils are here. You've got
Yes.
your 4 scissors. Like,
Yeah.
even coming to New York, I was like, what are the 7 things that I need to
Mhm.
feel like that is my studio again? You know what
Yep.
I mean? Like, what are
Yes.
the little bits and bobs that I need to have that kind of a space?
Yeah.
And it is really a challenge, when it doesn't feel good.
What are
When
those?
it's
Yeah,
like,
what are those 7 things? I'm curious. Do you know, can you name them? Or like even 3
oh,
of those?
I've got two great Dolan knives.
Mhm.
I made these, what is it called, like Fimo clay, and then you stick a bunch of pins in them so
Oh,
you
yeah.
can scrape stuff. I've
Yep.
got two of those that fit my little fingers.
Yep.
Um, one of those needle tools that are really skinny.
Yep.
They're not the like big silver ones, but like
Right.
maybe it's a Dolan tool too. Oh,
Yeah.
shout out to
Those
Dolan
tools, I know
tools.
Dolan tools.
Whew.
They are great. I got
I,
my first
I
knife and I was like, wow, where has this been in my life? I had to go
know.
to China to get it. Like I was traveling to China with other people and they're like, you need this knife. And I'm like, really? And got it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, jeepers, I had to go all the way to here to learn I needed this knife.
A friend went to Antigua last year and was like, "Do you want anything?" I was like, "Run to the Dolan table, get me a knife." And by the time she got there, they were sold out of the
Ah,
like little knives that I like. And I was
yes.
so not at her, but I was just like, I really wanted a new knife. Uh, um, I also have the little red mud tool, the
Mm-hmm.
tiny one,
Yep.
or
The rib.
yep.
Yep.
Um, and then I have like little bowls,
Mm-hmm.
like just two little bowls, one for
Yep.
water and one for maybe slip or whatever, but I just like having little bowls,
Yes.
and then one for tea, my tea bags,
Nice.
so that I can have, as I said, I like liquids. I
Yes, you
like to
do.
have tea.
I'm loving
Um,
learning that.
I know I'm like working in a co-working space for work right now, and I've had to move out of the like officey area because I was like, I need a table because I will
Mm-hmm.
have a green tea, I'll have a water, I'll have a
Yep.
coffee, and I'll probably have like a snack next to me. Like
Yep.
I want some
Yeah.
stuff.
Yep.
Um, so I brought some other like ribs and trimming tools, but
Those are
those are the
things.
things I use every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is good to know. I mean, that's knowing what the things are that you need. Like I remember I learned I don't like a table in the center of a room. Even when I have a really big room, I have to have a table near a wall. Like there has to be one wall side. I cannot work around. I tried so hard to be like, I'm the work around the whole circle table person.
You move, it moves.
Couldn't do it.
I wonder, I'm looking at the wall behind you and yours is organized. Mine has the other thing I brought are sticky notes because
Hmm.
I draw on little sticky notes. And so that, but I also like to work against a wall where like the things I
Hmm.
enjoy seeing, my like
Yes.
dog and sticky notes of things that I'm working on are all,
In your
you
space.
know, like here,
Yes.
like this is,
Yes.
if I were
Yes.
in a bubble, if I were in a cubicle, sometimes I think I'd thrive in a cubicle because I'm just like everything I need. It's like in this little.
I'm feeling so seen by you in this moment. At the end of this, I'll take you on a little tour and I'll show you how
Oh,
each of
great.
my workstations has that same thing and like
I
has
love
a
it.
visual wall in front of it with those things.
I love it. I mean, I love knowing it's just
Uh,
like, yeah, that's the sort of the space when I'm,
yeah.
yeah, I just like, maybe also I get distracted by
Yeah. It
other
helps
things
me
in the
stay
world.
focused. Yeah.
And then I'm just like here and then
Yeah.
my fanning wheels here. And I just feel like there is I'm just looking at the landscape that I
Yeah.
need, you know, it's all
Yeah.
here.
Yep. My inner
So
world
great.
is right around me.
Yeah.
But I think
Amazing.
I underestimated the importance of that knowing that too, like until I was out in my own spaces figuring it. I was like, I really underestimated knowing. I always thought it was a default, like, oh, you work like this because that's the space you have, but it isn't that at all. Like, because when I could change it, I did not want to.
Yeah, yeah. My first studio, I moved tables all the time
Hmm.
because I couldn't figure it out either. But
Hmm.
I'm very much a like um I want everything against a wall and I
Hmm.
want to spin around the middle of the space. Um and
Yep.
I think it's knowing exactly how you want your studio set up is a big
Hmm.
part of like knowing how you even want to be in your studio too.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, like I if I am going to read in my studio, it has to be in a different chair
Yes.
than right. Like I have a
Yes.
mental block of spaces. So like if I'm on my couch, I'm gonna probably watch a movie.
Hmm.
I'll try to work, but like that's movie space
Hmm.
versus, you know, I've been lucky to be able to like have different, at least different chairs to sit in, or, you know, like if
Hmm.
this is your podcast location, like
Hmm.
you're not going to move your mic over and start
Mm-mm.
drawing, you know,
Mm-mm.
this is podcast zone.
Uh-huh.
And so, yeah, I'm always, it's interesting to hear, and I don't feel it's maybe non-object makers. I think that's a pretty like object maker thing. I don't want to like tell
Yeah.
everybody how to be, but or you know, or put a label on object makers. There's something about like um about having like separate like maybe it's also
It's
even like you learn
stations.
to
Yeah.
yes,
Yes. Cause like I have a
yes,
glaze. I was just describing this to someone else. Like I have my kilns and my glazing down and surface work is down on this end. The clay
yeah,
making's in the middle area across like two tables. And then this area that I'm in here recording with you is my non-clay assembly area where I draw and paint. And like that's what happens down here. And there's James Clear, who wrote like the book Atomic Habits, had this question that says, what does this space encourage? And I have it on a sticky note because I just really love that question. Like, what does this space encourage? And so if I come downstairs, which is where my studio is, and I don't feel excited to work or I don't feel like I want to stay, then I know that something in my space is not encouraging the draw that I wanted to have. And so then I have to like tidy or get pieces out so that it's like, oh, you're going to come back because your space is telling you you need to come back. And like that's how it's sort
I
of manifested for me.
Yeah, I really like that. And it also isn't telling you that to leave.
Right.
It's asking you what you would need to have this space
Mm-hmm.
feel more encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a like, okay, then what's moved or what
Yeah.
needs to be moved or
Yeah.
how do we make that? I really like that. I tend to default towards the like, I'm gonna go home and nap,
Mm-hmm.
which sometimes is needed, and
Yeah.
sometimes what I really just need is to clean my desk.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
or get put my big headphones on and not hear the band practicing next door.
Yes.
um
Maybe you need a hammock in your studio, like so that you could
oh,
nap in your studio and then
I
work.
know, just a little, just like
Or
tiny naps.
Pampazan chair thing.
Our friend, my studio mate, has a dog, and he's a big dog,
Mm.
and he's a big dog bed, and I was threatened to take naps in it.
Oh yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna move us back towards something else.
Oh yeah.
This is really good though. I think I love hearing how people figure out space and think about space. Oh, and wondering, so we haven't two things we haven't done yet is have you described the kind of work that you make? And then also as you were describing space and the way that you feel about your own space, do you ever make installation work that is a space for someone else to come into? Because of, I was just kind of curious about that.
Yeah. So the work that I've been making, especially as of late, has been kind of both remaking objects that are from like memories of growing up, and so things that remind me of home a bit. And a lot of them have been baskets and bins and those like really bright plastic um you know base yeah baskets essentially, and laundry bins and all of that. And
Mhm.
so um they've been remaking them either from memory, or I would, because now I'm in the Midwest, one of the things that happened is I kind of realized that how I was raised and how I grew up and like what Hawaii looks like visually is
Mhm.
not really what the Midwest looks like visually. And so finding little things here and there,
Mm.
and tying them back to spaces that I grew up in
Mhm.
has been a lot of those objects that I've been making. And then in the past couple of months have been making, or in the past couple of years have been making holders specifically around food. So it started
Mm.
as like my studio snacks. So
Mhm.
like a
Mhm.
handful of grapes, a banana, like whatever I was bringing to my studio to snack on. Or yeah, and so have been making them more based on kind of tying those two together. And so they're very like nostalgic and sappy foods and
Mhm.
things that I really miss, and things that, you know, hold really sweet memories for me,
Mhm.
especially like treats I grew up eating.
Mhm.
Um, my brother and I were texting about like snacks that we remember eating growing up and getting
Mhm.
really excited about potentially what could hold those and what could be made specifically for those.
Mhm.
So yeah, I've been calling them like mini plinths for
Mhm.
food.
Mhm.
So holders that really kind of highlight the food, whether it's in shape or just like um showing them off a little bit.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah,
Cool. And does your brother still live in Hawaii too?
he does. He does. Yeah. So most of my mom's side of the family, or most of my family is still in Hawaii, and then some of my dad's sisters are in California.
Okay.
And there's a couple of people. My grandparents grew up in New York, so
Okay.
a lot of my pitch of wanting to be back here was my grandma grew up in Chinatown,
Yeah.
and I'm close to Chinatown, and so I've gotten to like go and see a lot of the food that she didn't necessarily eat because it was a lot of those stores have shut down.
Yeah.
But foods that like I remember growing up around and
Yeah.
seeing every weekend that I just haven't really been around since, in the past
Yeah.
decade or two. And so it's been really nice to find like foods that I forgot about or that I
Mm.
don't think about all the time, and kind of refocusing on those.
Mhm. And that
Yeah.
connection to your personal history too, and just something about
Yeah.
knowing where your ancestor has been. Like there's something kind of special about that experience too. And like this is the place where their experiences formed part of who they are, who I experienced. I enjoy that.
I really like how you put that. Yeah, it's I've and I don't know if it always happens either as I get older, as I move farther away from home, but I've
Mm-hmm.
just become so like sappy and nostalgic and just missing that
Yeah.
kind of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to figure out, new ways to sort of process that, or like, get to know my
Mm-hmm.
grandparents, or at least even like re-bring up things that don't really exist anymore. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Hawaii has changed so much. Every time I go back, it really is just like living as a memory. And so many
Mm.
things, I mean, everything's
Yeah. Yeah.
things move and they change, and that's how it works. And it's so interesting that my memories of spaces and places and treats, and there was like um I remember when I learned that peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are like, they're really small, but to children they seem like a whole meal.
Yeah.
But like,
Like you're
it's a
so
snack.
full after eating it. Yeah.
You can
As a
have a
kid.
peanut butter and
Yeah.
jelly because also in Hawaii we have spam musubis, which is like
Mm-hmm.
rice and spam on top. And I just remember being like, what, a whole lunch? I could eat that for lunch. And recently I'm like, that's a snack. Like, that is just
Yeah.
that's a tiny bit of food.
Yeah.
They're not like these big giant objects. They're like
Mm-hmm.
little, and they've always been little. It's not
Right.
inflation. It's not things changing, blah, blah,
Right.
blah. It's just that like, I'm an
You
adult. I'm
changed.
an adult.
Yeah.
And I'm not like going on a school trip and getting one little treat. Um, but I always think of that when I'm like, yeah, home is now. I get to like live in it as this memory, as this,
Yeah.
in this time it was a thing. And
Mm-hmm.
as it's moving and as it's changing, kind of holding on to that and readjusting it.
What size scale are the little objects that you're making right now?
So those are real. Did I send you the strawberries? Those are real
Yeah, you sent
strawberries.
me strawberries. Okay, so that's that size. But like the bucket and the laundry basket.
The laundry bin is a laundry bin size,
Okay.
like a tall, like a laundry, like
Yeah.
however tall laundry bins are.
Yeah.
And then the bucket is like a 5 gallon bucket. It's a little bucket, but
But
it's a
it's
bucket.
still, oh my gosh, because in the
I wish I could
pictures,
give you dimensions.
yeah, no,
And
that's
that
okay. Your
stool is like
gestures, I'm
it's
getting
like
it.
a
But yeah.
proper stool.
Yeah, they're like life size, you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah. I
Yeah.
keep trying. Yeah, somebody was like, I make trash cans as well, and they were like, "How big are the trash cans?" And I was like, "Oh, they're just trash can size. Like, I have no dimensions." I was just like, a trash can. Like, I just kept saying, like, think of a trash can. It's that size. Um,
It's
but
so
yeah,
okay. Oh, go ahead.
they're yeah. So I should have put dimensions because the strawberry things are little for
Okay.
strawberry size, and then everything else is life size.
That's kind of flooring me right now because when I look at them, they read as miniature. And so when you were talking about like the spam with the rice and like peanut butter and jelly being big when you're a kid, like it's so funny because I thought like, oh, these objects are like small, like the way that you reflect back on the food. Like it's actually smaller when you think of it as like when you're experiencing it from the future perspective than the when you actually experienced it, I
Yeah.
guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
So there's something about that I was like, oh wow, like okay, they're not though. They're like really big, but it made it conceptually kind of I made a jump that oh,
No,
she's making them small too, like the way her memory shifted or something.
I really enjoy that reflection because I've been making objects, holders for sizes of things that I remember. And then
Mm,
they come out of the kiln. I'm like, that's way too small. That's not like I'll go and buy it now, because now
yeah.
I'm like in a place where I can go buy the
Yeah.
shimai or whatever it is. I'm like, that's not it. In my brain, it was like this big giant thing,
Yeah.
and it's not. I'm just a taller,
Yeah.
and it's been an interesting thing of like when I keep building from memory and
Mm,
when that thing actually comes into existence.
yeah.
Um, so I really enjoy hearing that because that has been the reality. And I just kind of brushed it off as a very like bummer, just like, oh, did
Like,
it
oh,
again. Like,
yeah.
you forgot how clay shrinks, classic. But it really is
That's just
some
such a
really
funny line as a maker who like deals with that.
it's
Like,
it
you
was
forgot how
so
it shrinks. Classic.
it was so sweet because I was doing tests because I cannot for the life of me. I understand what 11% means in a concept. And they have at the residency, they have like a piece of plastic that is what the stamp that they use to
Oh,
make the things,
yep.
and you hold it up to what it is at cone 10. So like you can visually see how much it shrunk. I understand. I can explain that to somebody. I can tell them about it. I can do the math for them and help them figure it out. But
Mhm.
when I am making things, I have no idea. I am just like hoping and wishing. The fact that the laundry basket is the size it is was a surprise to everybody. Was genuinely a surprise to everybody because I literally was like, I just was building what I thought the size of it
Yeah.
was, and then it shrunk, and then it fired, and all that stuff, and it actually ended up to being what it is. And so,
Oh, wow.
um, it yeah, there I really enjoy that connection that you drew between like what I think something is and
Hmm.
how it sort of ends up in the end, or what
Mm.
it actually is.
I think our
Yeah.
memories, I mean, people write and talk and study memories and all that way more thoughtfully than I will in this moment. But I do find thinking about the experiences that we've had so fascinating, the way that we might, like, I remember it versus somebody else remembers it from that moment. And it makes me feel very untrustworthy in a lot of ways. Like, can you really trust it? Like, who, like, and then I just go, this is just my experience. So I'm going to go with
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've really kind of fallen into that, especially like there are things I think I remember so crystal clear, and then my mom's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like there is my grandma and I came and visited New York around St. Patrick's Day, I think for my like sweet 16-ish time, and
Mhm.
my cousin made a corned beef with an orange glaze.
Oh,
Like, okay.
yum.
I love I love
Life
a
of
slow
corned
cooked
beef.
meat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then she like it was and it was so juicy, and it wasn't sweet, but it was like
Mhm.
it was citrus. It was so good. And I've been thinking, and it had cloves in it, and I've been thinking about it since I was 16. And I told my grandma about it. She's like, oh my God, you gotta call Allie and ask for it. And I saw her last October, and she's like, I literally have no idea what you're talking about. I've never made that before. I don't even think I've made a corned beef before. And I was like, I have this thing I have been craving for 16 years. And I think about it every time I eat corned beef. And as great as corned beef is, it doesn't. And I was like, it could have been a ham. It could have been
Yeah.
it could have been, it was a roasted meat.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure it's corned beef because it was in March. And I talked to my grandma about it, and she's like, I vaguely remember it. My cousin that was there doesn't remember it. Nobody else remembers it. And I'm like, wow, the things you hold on to versus the things other people hold on
Mhm.
to,
Mhm.
sometimes the space is so big.
Yes.
And it it's a very nice, you asked about installations, and
Mhm.
I tried for a long time to make installations, but the truth is that other I the way I want to move through a space isn't necessarily going to be the same way somebody else is moving through a
Mhm.
space. And so
Mhm.
what I've really liked a little bit more are small moments,
Mhm.
because I think that's how I remember things,
Mm.
is as like like a I don't it's like a picture in my mind
Yeah.
of of that flavor. And
Yeah.
that is that little moment that I like somebody to live in a little
Mhm.
bit more than an entire
Mm.
environment, because I also don't remember the whole environment. I don't really remember the other
Yeah.
people that were there. I know I was cold because I didn't bring enough clothes, but the thing I don't remember how I ate it. I just remember seeing it with
Mm.
its clothes and its orange marmalade, and then gobbling it
Yeah.
and just eating the whole thing. And so, yeah, I don't quite know how to mentally figure out spaces enough. I haven't quite figured out how to like make somebody feel in a space that I felt,
Mhm.
but I do like having them like live in just a little tiny
Yeah.
moment
Yeah.
of their own. Um,
That's
and
so
yeah,
beautiful. Yeah, the thought of you're just creating like a little moment for them to live in the way that you remember and experience moments in your life. Like that's
yeah,
sparking things for me. Like I'm going to be thinking about that now going forward. I'll be like, oh, yeah, there's that moment. Because it is like
yeah,
those moments are beautiful and potent. And like, I wonder about other people's memories, like how many people remember the environment of the moment. when you're talking? That's a really interesting question to me to wonder about. I'm going to ask my siblings about it, what they remember.
I love a DeSousa, like who doesn't, his
Hmm.
big, sort of fabric
Yeah.
installations. And
Yeah.
I I've always aspired to do that, just as
Yeah.
that kind of enveloping of space
Yeah.
is, no matter how many times you experience it, is moving.
It is.
And 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 there I just think, because I even in that, I relish in the details, right?
Yeah.
Like, even
Oh
in
my
that
God.
gorgeous, overwhelming
Yeah.
space, like when you look at the handles, the way that
Oh,
there was care in that,
yeah.
I those are, I think, and those are the things that I tend to just get drawn towards and
Yeah.
prioritize. And not that I have no interest in
Hmm.
everything else, because I do. Just like when I think of that installation, those are the things I
Yeah.
think of.
Yeah. Yep.
And those are the things that evoke any sort of home for me, or like a memory for me,
Yeah.
because I didn't live in that kitchen, and it's
Right.
walking through his space and his memories. But there are parts of that that
Hmm.
do feel like my home, or do feel
Hmm.
like somewhere I grew up, or
Hmm.
do hold
Yeah.
that nostalgia. And so yeah, I like those, like, little tiny, just whoops.
Hmm. It's a very good sound effect. But one thing I need you to talk about is your mostly butter residency. Can
Yeah,
you tell people about
I'll try to
its
do it quickly.
origins? Oh, don't
Yes.
take your time. It's okay. But like, tell us about how it started and what it is and where you're going with it.
Even when I was at Northridge, anywhere throughout all of this has been me just saying, like, I love food, and
Hmm.
I am interested in food. And try to figure out what that was. Is that like, I want to make big, I want to be a Klaus Oldenburg and make big food objects,
Hmm.
so I definitely went down that route. And what do I love the kitchens that they were? Do I love the domestic space of it? Do I love the objects that lead to the food?
Hmm.
And going through all of that, the truth of the matter is I just like the not just I like to eat food, I like to make food, but I like the sharing of food.
Mm.
um Even this work is coming from, like, memories of both of my grandparents and my aunt, like, cooking in the kitchen,
Hmm.
and just kind of sitting there and picking at the food as they eat. And at my grandma's house, like, while she was cooking, there was like 17 dips and chips and bips and bops. And we would just eat all day. Like, that was
Yeah.
the whole Easter was the best, because we would eat Easter brunch, and then we'd eat Easter dinner, and we literally spend the whole day between, like, eggs and ham. So it
Mm.
it was all around smelling and foods. And that is really the part that I enjoy.
Mm.
Um, Not the only part, but a big part of it. And
Yeah.
so um, I'm pretty sure it was Claire. I'm going to give them uh, all of the credit for this. Was um, kind of talking about, like, you should do that.
Hmm.
And I saw a a book of somebody, and now I'm forgetting his name, and I feel really bad. I want to say it's Mark Fisher,
Okay.
but was doing a 1 day residency where he inviting people to go to this Korean grocery store in Chicago with him.
Hmm.
And they would shop around the Korean grocery store, and then they'd eat. And it was just
Mm.
this very quick, it was documented, and maybe a bit of information about the residency. But the concept, it kind of introduced to me this idea of, like, a residency is just a time spent together. It can be an
Oh.
afternoon together. It doesn't have to, I don't have to fly to New York and take off of work.
But you know.
And so, but not upset about it, not upset at all. But it can really just be like, I've also been calling them alternative studio visits, and I
Yeah.
get overwhelmed by studio visits. And what a lovely way to kind of learn about somebody when you, like, cook together, because it's
Yeah.
it's it's small and it's quiet, and it involves a lot of success and failure and working together and being like, how do you feel about that? Or, like, that didn't work out, let's try it again. And so um and then in combination with that, as much as I cook and I bake, when I first started baking, I would get, and I still do, things I love, I have a
Mhm.
hard time making them because
Mm.
it was started with an apple pie. I was like, what if it's a bad apple pie? What if
Mhm.
I, in my first pie making, make a shit pie and then what? And
The
then what do
world
I do with
ends.
that
The world
information?
ends with my shit pie.
Yeah. And I was just like, it really built it up in my head of like, it was such a special food. And what if I am the one to ruin it for the rest of the world? Like it's nothing, never anything that big, but in my brain it was huge.
Yep.
And so I uh kind of squishing all of this together, mostly butter is out of my kitchen, and an artist proposes something they've never baked and that they've always wanted to make, and
Mhm.
we make it together.
Mm.
It's pretty low stakes stuff in terms of like supplies, and I have
Mhm.
mostly everything, and everything I don't have we kind of figure it out.
Mhm.
And it's just a really nice way to like spend a day and get to know
Mm.
somebody. And
Mhm.
then you know, with all of that nostalgia, usually it's things that it's not always, sometimes like somebody sees a thing on,
Yeah.
and really wants to make it. But usually it's people who are like, one of the first ones with Kelly O'Brien, and she runs Weeded Horn in Cleveland.
Mhm.
And she went to Paris and had a tart, those, like a, I don't know how to speak French, but it's a lemon
I
tart.
don't either.
But it's those very, very fancy little lemon tarts.
Mm.
And she just had the loveliest time in Paris and really wanted to make it. And it's such a, neither of us had the technical skills to make this thing. Of the like 14 we tried to make, I think 4 came out. Like it was a real mess. Like it took us all day. And I think she ended up staying, I mean, I think they were going to stay over anyway, but it it was just such a mess. We did the worst job, but it was so much fun because we were like, I mean, if you're gonna
Yeah.
fail, you should fail with somebody, and you
Might
should
as
have a
well.
you should have a couple of giggles while you're doing it. And so yeah, that's what it's become. Yeah, you just
And
come
then
to
are
town and
you
bake something
still
nice.
doing it? And now that, yeah.
I am, yeah. I haven't um pumped it up as much as I should.
Yeah.
But if you want to come out to Detroit, we can bake together. Send me something
You
that
never
you've always
know.
wanted to bake. Um, uh, yeah, I'm still doing it and would like to do it more. I slowed down, especially during COVID, and got a little
Yeah.
nervous. But the other nice part of it is sometimes when it's people in town, then we have other people over and
Yeah.
they come and eat the treats or spend the day with us, or just like a very nice way to share food without having to like make a whole dinner party or something, just a
Yes.
very like, come over, have, some biscuits, some chicken.
I love it. I seriously love
Uh,
it so much. So if I come to Detroit, I will definitely be reaching out to you and
yeah,
we will do this. Cooking is
please do.
it's such a connector, right? Like it is such a connecting experience to cook with other people and and the way that food is shared through families. And like I remember growing up not really knowing what food was just the food my family made and what food came from generations before. And when I learned what food was generational, I was kind of like mind blown, like, oh,
Yeah,
we have this food that's been passed on, that not every family eats this food. And I just couldn't recognize it because it was part of our normal day to day. And that's, yeah. And I love that about it.
I live away from home now, and I was never big on traditions, but lately I've been finding myself like enjoying certain parts of the things
Yeah.
that, like, when my grandma cooked, she always had multiple meats, just like
Mm,
in general. Like there was a
yeah.
ham, there was a seafood, and there was like
Yeah.
and there was an abundance. And there are parts
Mm.
of that I really love, of the like, I know I never knew how to cook for less than 10 people. I like literally just have no idea how to conceptually do it. And it's kind of, and that's like one thing that I'm sure I could learn, but I
Yeah.
really enjoy, of the like, okay, if we're gonna have a dinner, there's gonna be like multiple meats,
Yes.
we're just gonna have an abundance. And I really like
Yes.
those things. And I know you're talking a little bit more about like specific dishes,
But
but
that's a tradition too. Like to cook in
yeah.
abundance is a tradition.
And yeah, and just like the things that you kind of pass down,
Mhm.
that as I figure life out slowly but surely, hopefully, um the things that you want to hold on to,
Yeah.
and the things that you feel like you need to hold on to, just
Yep.
to, to kind of keep things moving. And it's a really sweet way, I think, to think about
Mm-hmm.
family,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the bits that you kind of take from everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. What is it that you want to hang on to is such a question. And like a question that, like probably the last year and a half, I kept asking myself related to this was just like, is that my belief or is that a belief that like was given to me? And then if it is, do I want to keep it or do I need to let it go? And just that active practice of kind of reflecting on what has built me into the person that I am and the experiences I've had, and how do I just, sort through that a little bit more and take time to question that. And it being able to even ask that question requires, for me, requires some time of calm that isn't always available, I think, in life.
For sure. Sometimes
You're just
you just got
going.
to get out the
Yeah.
door. You got to get
Yeah.
out the door.
Yeah. Get those shoes
Um,
on.
but the other really nice part of mostly butter is it's so slow, and it's
Mm,
really just, I try to be realistic with the people of how long it'll take, and just be
yeah.
like, hey, if you can try to set aside the whole day so that we can
Yeah.
move really slowly, and we can, if we fail, we can try again, and we can
Mm,
be considerate and
yeah.
move. Like, what you're talking about, of like, sometimes you don't get the opportunity to move slowly and move
Mm-hmm.
specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Always hoping that, like, okay, when I cook, that is my time to
Yeah.
be a bit slow.
Yep.
And so hoping that, with other people, like, there's a functional side of cooking where you have to eat. And
Yeah.
then there's just like a really lovely side of being intentional in all of
Mm-hmm.
the parts,
Mm-hmm.
that I think is sometimes overlooked, or just, just doesn't get,
Yeah.
not everybody gets to have, is more what
No.
I mean.
Yeah, and you're making space for people to slow down, and like it's a permission for them to slow down. Like your cooking space, when we go back to that question of like what does this space encourage? It encourages slowness. It encourages taking time. And then even when you were describing how you work in the studio, you go from this thing to this thing to this thing. That's about slowness too though, because you're not
Yeah.
in a rush. You're not saying like it's not a scarcity thing. You're not saying I only have 2 hours to do this thing. You're like, no, I have time to work on this thing, have some tea, come back to this thing. And that's a that feels like sort of in defiance of what the outside world often tells you need to do.
Yeah, it's, when you were asking about, like, difficulties that I've come across, it that, that's kind of what it is like, well, I've got 2 hours between the end of work and
Mm-hmm.
dinner. And I wish I were better at, working on a timeline. But it and sometimes with specific projects, I can work on a timeline of,
Sure, of
you figure out
course.
when you figure out. But
Yeah.
when you just want to take time, it there is a privilege and there is a loveliness of being able to be like, well, I'll try it, and then I will sit for a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll try something else, and then I can start over. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that slowness, yeah, it really does have to be built in or created into your practice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that space, yeah, I wish it existed in the world a little bit more, or at
Mm-hmm.
least in America, and a little
Yeah.
bit how our systems are working. But it's a rarity to find, and I think, though, it's really helpful when other people do it.
Yeah.
Set aside their own studio time, and getting to watch how other people have found that slowness in their own practice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that kind of stuff is huge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it often requires being able to say no to other
Oof,
things in
yeah.
order to do that. And that is also a practice.
Every day, every
Every day.
single day.
Working on it all the time. All the time. All the time. Okay, well, let's now officially go into the studio time wrap up, where I'm going to ask you these final questions. And the first one that I have is, please finish the sentence. When I don't know what to create or make, I
make a basket, or I bake a cake. I think I'm somebody who solves problems through working with my hands, and baskets have become a bit of a second nature. I used to just not just throw pots, but throwing pots was a really quick way for me to work with my hands without consequence. You know, kind of make a bunch of cups. It was a bit mindless for me because that's not a focus of mine. It's not a part of my practice. That's very functional for my household to have cups. But and lately it's been more just I'll make a cake, or I'll make I'll bake something tasty, or I'll spend too long making a chicken pot pie. But that sort of mindlessness, again, cooking's not mindless. People do it for a living. There's craft and skill, but for me, there's a mindlessness behind still being able to accomplish something while I work with my hands that allows my brain some free time.
Yep. Yeah, totally understand that. The next part is, I asked you to share 5 songs that you could listen to on repeat in your studio or anytime. And the songs that you gave me were I love people's playlists so much. Usually I listen to it before I talk to the person, so I kind of have like a little feeling, and I didn't yet, so I'm going to listen to them today though while I work.
The titles are more chaos than the songs. They're just I think the music that you had like in your 20s or your early 20s in college is kind of the music that goes through. So they're just like indie alt poppy. Maybe I have a yeahs in there.
So you have Pork Soda by Glass Animals, DLZ by TV on the Radio. I like their name, their band name.
Oh,
I'm familiar with them. I'm gonna have to check them out. And then Maps by the Yes, Your Dog by Soccer Mommy, and Intro by the XX. And so I am wondering if you can share how these contribute to your creative flow.
When you talked about a sound a little bit, when I've gotten to organize or create shows, they have been either titles or parts of songs. Things that, like, if I could just play it, if you could have headphones on as you walk throughout, that's sort of the like undercurrent vibe. And I think when I make, I have a sort of it's very lofty for me to say, but if there were a biopic, there's always like undercurrent songs that I'm feeling. And I like when they're really melodic and they're very I don't know enough to speak to music, but songs that are in my head as I'm making. I used to run, and it would just be like one bit of a song that was on repeat in my mind. And these songs are definitely it. They are just, they can fall into the background, but they also can create a rhythm as I work. There are songs that I think I've listened to a variation of these plus 10 more on like 10-hour road trips. Literally just like I was talking about baking, like it's something that feels so comfortable that my mind is a little bit more open and free. And that album, that Glass Animals album, is called How to Be a Human Being, and the whole album from top to bottom, for a while I didn't know the difference between the songs because it just kind of became a whole kind of soundtrack that I have in the back of my head. When you listen to it, you might be like, oh, I get how this would be like what is that movie? It's got Garden State vibes. Just in its like hipness of like very pop all poppy indie, coolness underneath. Which was also a movie that I think was huge for me, and so it plays in my head. But they're all very like, they can fade to the background, and then parts of them can come a bit louder, and they just make a nice soundtrack. The song Maps came about, so Anjali, we were in grad school, and knew that it was just a song we like would quietly, the little hook of it where
Yes.
they just sing maps, we would just like sing to each other like while we walked past each other, and it was always it was just always around us. It was a
Yep.
song that we just would sing that maps part over and over and over again. And it was just yeah, maybe we heard it in the car at some point, but it was an earworm for us for
Yeah.
sure.
It just stays with you. It's like, oh my God. Okay, my next question is, what brings you joy in your creative life?
Uh, Definitely people.
Mhm.
So getting to have the groups of people that I've got to be around,
Mhm.
I think I couldn't have predicted. I couldn't have known that it'd be like such a sweetness around me. I think
Yeah.
especially in arts, I thought it would be competitive or a bit bitey, but it really, I've gotten to be around people who are just like, what can I do? Or
Yeah.
like it just always feels super supportive, or it, yeah, people, there's just such an encouragement and a kindness, and not to
Mhm.
say there's not competition and jealousy and all of the normal things, but
Yeah.
they're always through the lens of care, and they're always through the lens of support. And
Yeah.
yeah, I can, and I don't think that exists in artistic communities all the time.
Mhm.
And so I think it's a reason why all my friends are artists, because
Mhm.
it's not bitey, and it really is like, as you open the door, then you like shuffle everybody in, or somebody's, shuffling you in. And
Yeah.
um that sort of it's also, I think Detroit does it really, really well.
Mm.
I've never really lived in another city as an artist, but there's so much going on in that city, and you're kind of you're not forced to, but the people who are there and they stick around are the people
Mhm.
who are participating and
Mhm.
really kind of exemplifying this like concept of community that
Yeah.
um I was listening to maybe one of your first or second podcasts of, you feel like you have that in school and then you leave and you're like,
Mhm.
where did all my people go?
Mhm.
And I've been able to find some of those people. Some of them are
Mhm.
from school, and some of
Mhm.
them just kind of, you know, attract others attract others. And
Yeah.
um it's if I stopped having a studio practice, I think it's the part that I would continue to feel creative in,
Yeah.
even if I didn't make, like,
Yeah.
the past few years have felt like I wasn't making a lot, but I was helping people run workshops, and I
Yeah.
was reading artist statements, and we were going to shows, and we were watching performances. And
Yeah.
that is that sort of space that it's just so nice. Like
Yeah.
it's so lovely to have that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I hope everyone gets it.
It is. It's really, I know, I do wonder if other people have it too, like if they have that same community around them and like what it looks like in different versions of it for other people. And it is, I think it's an active, I mean, I live very rurally where our home is. And so it's an active practice to maintain artistic and creative friendships because of where we're geographically located. And
Mhm.
but it's so, like you were talking earlier in the conversation about your writing partner that you have, and like I have those people too, and it does take intention to keep that happening, and it's also an openness to when you meet somebody that they can become that with you and for you, and you can become that for them too, and just how fun that is when you have that partner to do those partners, it's multiple people to do things with and to experience your creativity with. And yeah, it's just very nourishing to have that.
It's so lovely. I'm sure that people are thriving in their practice when they get a thing and they feel like they can celebrate internally.
Yeah.
But I learned I'm very much a like, I don't know. I like to share it with other people, or
Yes.
like when other people really, if you're not having exciting things going on, it's so lovely when someone you love has something really exciting
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
And a lot, yeah, it kind of takes off of like any sort of feelings of your own that are like, oh, what a bummer, this isn't happening for me. But it's something else is happening for like somebody
Yeah.
else in your life, and you get to celebrate that, and you get
Yes.
to mostly be on the like, I don't know, other people are thriving. Like when they thrive,
And then there's
we'll figure it
hope.
out,
It keeps the window of hope open when you're not thriving or when it feels
Yeah.
like you're not thriving. There's still this hope like, oh, but my friend is and they're getting this. So
Yeah.
that means it's possible. And like, okay, my turn, my turn or my opportunity is coming. I'm just going to keep seeking till it gets, till I get there. For sure. Well, the last one is finish this sentence. My creativity is
Hopefully ever changing. Hopefully it is something that I'm like is melding and becoming other things. And maybe it's being a maker today and maybe it's looking like something tomorrow. And yeah, I think even in the past few years of opening up of like creativity doesn't, like you said, look like drawing a hyper realistic apple. It really is just at when you are standing and you have an opportunity to like take a chance, then you can just kind of like wiggle and take a chance. Yeah.
I like that. Just wiggle and take a chance. Thank you so much for talking with
Thank
me. And
you.
I have loved learning more about you and your work. And I'm really, truly looking forward to what else you do. Thank you for this time.
Thank you. This has been really lovely and something I didn't know I needed to kind of, I feel like there were so many insights from you and it's really helpful to talk through my practice this way. So thank you.
Let's take inspiration from Sara and imagine participating in her one-day baking residency, Mostly Butter. What is something that you would like to make that you've never made before? Bonus this week, draw a picture of what you want to make and tag her at Mostly Butter on Instagram. To learn more about Sara, follow her on Instagram at SuperSaraBear and at Mostly Butter. And also take time to check out her website, saranishikawa.com. If you enjoy the podcast, please share it and rate and review wherever you listen to your podcast. If you are new to the podcast, be sure to check out Season 1 and the first 2 episodes of Season 2. As always, thanks so much for joining me. Bye.